Cadiz's a harbour of whispers. The morning mist clings to Cadiz harbour like the weight you carry, settling over everything with that peculiar heaviness that comes before great change. It's October 1805, and if you were standing on these ancient Spanish stones right now, you'd feel it too. That strange stillness that arrives when the world holds its breath. Picture yourself here for a moment. The sun hasn't quite broken through the grey, and the water lies mirror still between the harbour walls. These are the same walls that have watched Phoenician traders, Roman galleys and Moorish vessels come and go for 3,000 years. Tonight, as you lie there calculating tomorrow's decisions, remember this. Even empires pause sometimes, caught between what was and what must be. In the harbour, 33 ships of the line rest at anchor. French and Spanish flags hang limp in the windless dawn. A combined fleet more powerful than anything Nelson has ever faced. From your bedroom window, if you could see them, they'd look almost peaceful. Magnificent wooden cities floating on glass-calm water, their masts reaching toward the grey sky like the fingers of sleeping giants. But there's something else in the air here, something that speaks to every leader who's ever stood at a crossroads with impossible choices on either side. Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve knows this feeling well. He's been carrying it for months now, the way you carry your own weight. That constant pressure between duty and instinct, between what others expect and what your experience whispers in the quiet moments. Villeneuve stands at his cabin window aboard the Bucentaure, watching the harbour wake up. He's 51 years old, a careful man who survived the revolution by being neither too bold nor too cautious, walking that narrow line leaders know so well. His dark eyes reflect the grey water as he considers the dispatch that arrived yesterday from Paris. Napoleon's words burn in his memory. "The enemy does not impress me. I count on your zeal to second my plans." The Emperor's confidence radiates from every line, that absolute certainty that has conquered most of Europe. But Villeneuve has been at sea for 30 years. He knows what Napoleon, for all his genius, cannot, that the ocean doesn't care about imperial ambitions. The harbour begins to stir. You can hear it if you listen. The gentle creaking of rope and timber, the soft splash of oars as the first boats move between the ships. Somewhere, a boatswain's whistle cuts through the morning air, followed by the shuffle of bare feet on wooden decks. These are the sounds of 28,000 men beginning another day, most of them unaware that their world is about to change forever. What strikes you most about this moment? What would speak to you as you lie there in the dark, mind racing through your own challenges, is how ordinary it all seems. Great turning points rarely announce themselves with thunder and lightning. They arrive quietly, dressed as just another Tuesday morning when you have to make just another impossible decision. The Spanish officers know this too. Many of them have served these waters since before the revolution turned their world upside down. They understand the sea's moods, the way the wind speaks differently when storms are coming, and they've been watching their French allies with growing unease. Captain Dionisio Alcalá Galiano of the Bahama moves quietly through his ship's morning routine. At 47, he's one of Spain's finest naval minds, a man who's spent his life mapping unknown coasts and studying the science of the sea. His charts of the Strait of Magellan are works of art, precise and beautiful. But this morning, precision feels like a luxury he can't afford. The alliance with France sits uneasily with many Spanish captains. They remember when these same French ships were their enemies, when Spanish and British vessels fought side by side against revolutionary France. Politics, they know, can change overnight. The sea remains constant. As the mist begins to lift, you can see the true scale of what's gathered here. The Santísima Trinidad, the largest warship in the world, dominates the anchorage like a floating cathedral. 4 decks, 140 guns, and a crew of over 1,000 men. She's the pride of the Spanish Navy, and this morning she rides at anchor with the weight of a nation's hopes. But even aboard the mighty Trinidad, there are whispers, the kind of whispers you hear in your own organization when people sense change coming, when the official story doesn't quite match what everyone can feel building beneath the surface. The French sailors whisper about Admiral Nelson somewhere out there beyond the horizon. The British commander's reputation precedes him like a storm front, a man who breaks the rules of naval warfare the way you sometimes have to break the rules of business to survive. Conventional wisdom says fleets fight in parallel lines, trading broadsides in orderly fashion. Nelson, they say, does something different, something that turns order into chaos and chaos into victory. The Spanish sailors whisper about their own readiness. Many of their ships have been in harbor too long, their crews a mixture of veterans and pressed men who've barely seen the sea. They know what the French perhaps don't, that seamanship isn't something you can decree from Paris. It's earned in storms and gales, built through years of working together until a crew moves like a single organism. Villeneuve knows all this. It's written in the lines around his eyes, the way he holds his shoulders when he thinks no one is watching. He's fought Nelson before, at the Battle of the Nile, and lived to tell the tale, which is more than most can say. He knows what's coming won't be like the textbook battles they study at naval academies. But he also knows something about duty that you'd recognize, that moment when your personal doubts have to yield to the larger purpose, when the weight you carry isn't just your own anymore, but belongs to everyone counting on you to make the hard choice. The morning light grows stronger, burning through the mist to reveal the harbor in sharp detail. 28,000 men eating their breakfast, checking their equipment, writing letters they hope they won't need to send. In a few hours, these ships will weigh anchor and sail out into the Atlantic, where Nelson waits with 27 ships of the line and a plan that will change everything. But for now, in this suspended moment, there's still time. Time for Villeneuve to walk his quarterdeck and consider alternatives. Time for the Spanish captains to drill their gun crews one more time. Time for ordinary sailors to feel the morning sun on their faces and remember what they're fighting for. This is what strikes you most about leadership in moments like these. How it's not really about having all the answers. It's about carrying the questions with dignity, about making decisions with incomplete information and living with the consequences, about finding courage not in the absence of fear, but in the presence of responsibility. Villeneuve understands this as he watches his fleet prepare for sea. Every captain in that harbor understands it. They're about to sail into one of history's most decisive battles, but right now they're just professionals doing their jobs, checking the wind, testing the rigging, making sure their men are ready for whatever comes next. The parallel to your own world isn't hard to see. How many times have you stood at your own version of this harbor, looking out at challenges that seem insurmountable, carrying weight that feels too heavy, but knowing that tomorrow you'll weigh anchor anyway, because that's what leaders do? The mist continues to lift, and with it comes the promise of wind. Soon, very soon, these 33 ships will spread their sails and carry 28,000 souls toward a rendezvous with destiny. But that's still hours away, and right now, in the growing light of this October morning, there's peace in the harbor. The kind of peace you need to find tonight, before your own tomorrow begins. Life below deck, dreams and duty. Below the weathered decks of these ships, 28,000 souls are stirring to life. In the cramped quarters of the gun decks, hammocks sway gently with the harbor's rhythm. Canvas cocoons holding men who've learned to sleep anywhere, anytime, in whatever peace they can find. Listen to that creaking, the soft groans of oak and iron that become a lullaby when you've nowhere else to rest. These sailors know something about finding calm in impossible spaces. Something you might recognize tonight as you try to quiet your mind in whatever sanctuary you've carved from your own demanding world. Aboard the French ship of the line, l'Indomptable, the morning watch is beginning. 74 guns she carries and 600 men who call her home. In the dim light filtering through the gun ports, sailors are rolling their hammocks with practiced efficiency. The same ritual they've performed 1,000 mornings before. There's Jean-Baptiste, a gunner from Marseille, carefully folding the canvas that held his dreams. His hands move automatically while his mind drifts to the letter tucked in his sea chest, 3 months old now, from his Marie. She writes of their daughter taking her first steps, of the olive harvest, of waiting, always waiting. The weight he carries isn't so different from yours, is it? The responsibility to those counting on him, the quiet fear that he might not be enough for what's coming. But watch how he moves through his morning routine with such deliberate care. There's wisdom in that rhythm. 2 decks above, Captain Jean-Jacques Berenger stands at his cabin window, watching the mist lift from Cadiz Bay. L'Indomptable, the Indomitable. He chose this ship's name himself, back when the world seemed full of different possibilities. Now, at 43, with silver threading through his dark hair, he wonders about the weight of names and the promises they make. Beringer knows his mathematics. 33 ships against Nelson's 27. It should favor them, this combined French and Spanish fleet, but numbers on paper don't account for everything, do they? They don't measure the intangible things: experience, unity, that peculiar alchemy that turns individual effort into something greater. He's fought the British before. At the Nile, 7 years ago, when everything went wrong. He knows the sound their guns make, different from French cannon, somehow sharper. He knows how quickly confidence can crumble when the first broadside tears through oak and flesh alike. But duty is duty, and the Emperor's orders are clear. In the galley below, the cook is preparing what passes for breakfast. Hardtack and small beer, a bit of salt pork for the lucky ones. The bread is stale, has been for weeks, but it fills the hollow spaces. Amazing how simple sustenance becomes precious when everything else is uncertain. The Spanish sailors mix easily with their French allies now, after months together in port. Language barriers dissolved into the universal tongue of shared purpose, shared apprehension. They trade stories in broken phrases, hands gesturing where words fail. Carlos, a young Spaniard from Seville, shows a miniature portrait of his sweetheart to Pierre, a Breton twice his age. Neither speaks the other's language fluently, but Pierre nods and smiles, understanding perfectly. He pulls out his own treasure, a lock of grey hair tied with faded ribbon. His wife of 20 years. Some things need no translation. These small rituals of connection, they're what make the impossible bearable. The way humans reach for each other across whatever divides them, finding common ground in shared hopes and fears. You know this instinct well, don't you? The way you've learned to find your people, your tribe, among the chaos of building something meaningful. The morning light grows stronger now, streaming through the gun ports in golden shafts. It catches the brass fittings, the polished barrels of cannon, the worn faces of men who've made their peace with uncertainty. On the quarterdeck of the Spanish flagship Santísima Trinidad, the largest warship in the world, Admiral Gravina reviews his charts one final time. 4 decks, 136 guns, and the hopes of Spain riding on her massive frame. She's beautiful in her way. A floating cathedral of oak and iron, built when the world believed in permanence. Gravina is a thoughtful man, more scholar than warrior by temperament. He's studied the classics, knows his history, knows that great enterprises often hinge on moments that seem almost accidental. Wind shifts, signal flags missed, the 1,000 small chances that compound into destiny. He thinks of his gardens in Cadiz, just visible from here when the morning haze clears completely. Olive trees he planted as a young man, now bearing fruit he may never taste again. There's something profound in that continuity. The way what we build outlasts our ability to tend it. Below decks, the rhythm of preparation continues. Sailors check their gear with the methodical care of craftsmen. Ropes coiled just so. Cutlasses honed to proper sharpness, the 1,000 details that separate professionals from amateurs. But listen beneath the activity. There's music drifting up from the lower decks. Someone has a fiddle, and the melody is achingly familiar. A song about home, about longing, played in a minor key that speaks to something universal in the human heart. The music stops conversations, draws men from their tasks. For a moment, 600 souls aboard L'Indomptable are united in something larger than duty or fear. They're connected to the eternal human story, the one that includes your own restless nights and quiet victories, your own dreams of building something that matters. The fiddler is young, maybe 19, with calloused fingers that find the strings by instinct. He plays with his eyes closed, lost in the melody, and for these few minutes he's not a sailor facing uncertain odds. He's pure music, pure expression of everything words cannot capture. When the song ends, the silence holds longer than it should. Then gradually, the sounds of preparation resume. But something has shifted. The weight they all carry seems more bearable, shared among them like communion. Captain Berenger, listening from his cabin, recognizes the tune. His mother used to hum it while she worked in their kitchen in Toulon, flour on her hands, sunlight streaming through the windows that looked out on a harbor much like this one. Memory is a strange navigator, isn't it? The way it can transport us across decades in an instant, making the past feel more real than the present moment. Sometimes, in your own quiet hours, don't you find yourself pulled back to simpler times? When the weight you carry now was just a dream, and the future seemed full of infinite possibility. The wind is picking up now, and with it comes the knowledge that this peaceful interlude is drawing to a close. Soon the signal flags will fly, anchors will rise, and these 33 ships will transform from floating communities into instruments of empire. But right now, there's still time for one more song, one more letter written in careful script, one more moment of connection between souls who understand what it means to face tomorrow with courage born of necessity. The kind of courage you carry too, though you might not recognize it. The quiet strength that gets you through each day of building, leading, carrying others towards something better than what exists today. The Admiral's Burden, Villeneuve's Dilemma. In his private cabin aboard the Bucentaure, Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve sits at his writing desk, quill poised above parchment that remains stubbornly blank. The morning light filters through salt-stained windows, casting long shadows across maps that tell him everything he already knows and fears. He sets the quill down, picks it up again. The letter to his wife grows no easier with each attempt. You know this feeling, don't you? The weight of words that refuse to come because the truth feels too heavy to commit to paper. The careful balance between honesty and hope, between sharing your burden and protecting those you love from its full weight. Villeneuve understands this dance. He's been performing it for months now, ever since Napoleon's impossible demands began arriving with clockwork regularity. Take the fleet to sea, engage the British, secure French dominance of the Channel. Simple words on imperial parchment, as if strategy could overcome the mathematics of naval warfare through sheer force of will. The Admiral knows his ships. More importantly, he knows his enemy. Nelson's fleet waits beyond the horizon like a patient predator. Villeneuve has studied every report, every intelligence dispatch. The British ships are faster, their crews more experienced, their gunnery precision legendary throughout European waters, his own combined fleet. Well, the Spanish ships are magnificent vessels, but their crews have been blockaded in port for months. The French sailors, brave as they are, lack the relentless drilling that makes British gun crews so devastatingly effective. It's a calculation any experienced admiral can make. The kind of cold arithmetic that keeps you awake at 2 a.m., running numbers that never add up the way you need them to. But duty is not arithmetic. Villeneuve rises from his desk, moves to the stern windows where Cadiz Harbour spreads before him. 33 ships of the line, nearly 21,000 men whose lives rest in his hands. Each vessel represents months of construction, years of training, the hopes of families scattered across 2 nations. The weight you carry in your own endeavors might feel different in scope, but the essence remains the same. That crushing responsibility for others' livelihoods, their futures, their trust placed in your judgment. The knowledge that your decisions ripple outward in ways you can never fully predict or control. He thinks of his last meeting with Napoleon. The Emperor's eyes, burning with that peculiar intensity that had conquered most of Europe. The invasion of England depends upon you, Villeneuve. History will remember what you accomplish, or what you fail to accomplish. History, as if the judgment of future generations could somehow alter the reality of British naval superiority, as if willpower alone could transform his crews into Nelson's equals overnight. You've felt this pressure too, haven't you? The impossible expectations, the gap between what others believe you can achieve and what you know to be realistically possible. The terrible isolation of command, where sharing your doubts feels like betrayal, but carrying them alone threatens to crush you entirely. Villeneuve returns to his desk, attempts the letter once more. "My dearest Marie-Jeanne," he writes, then stops. What can he tell her? That he's about to lead 21,000 souls into what his every instinct screams will be disaster. That duty demands he ignore his professional judgment for the sake of imperial ambition. Instead, he writes of small things: the beauty of Spanish sunrises, the dignity of his officers, the strange camaraderie that develops among men facing uncertain futures together. These truths feel safer, more manageable than the larger realities pressing against his chest like a physical weight. Outside his cabin, the ship continues its morning routine. Somewhere above, sailors are checking rigging, adjusting sails, preparing for whatever orders their admiral might give. They trust him, not because they understand the strategic situation, but because trust is what makes naval discipline possible. They've placed their lives in his hands with the simple faith that he will use their sacrifice wisely. This is perhaps the heaviest burden of all, not the fear of failure, but the knowledge that others believe in you completely, even when your own confidence wavers. Villeneuve has served in enough battles to understand what's coming. He's seen how quickly order dissolves into chaos once the guns begin firing, how the most elegant battle plans crumble under the reality of smoke, confusion, and the terrible mathematics of iron shot against wooden hulls. But he's also seen something else: the way ordinary men become extraordinary when circumstances demand it. How courage spreads from person to person like a flame jumping between candles. The strange alchemy that transforms fear into determination, doubt into resolve. Perhaps this is what Napoleon understood that his admiral could not. Not the tactical details or strategic calculations, but the transformative power of necessity. The way impossible situations sometimes produce impossible results, not through magic, but through the accumulated choices of individuals who refuse to surrender. You've witnessed this in your own sphere, haven't you? Moments when your team exceeded every reasonable expectation, when constraints became catalysts, when pressure forged something stronger than comfort ever could. The mysterious way that shared struggle creates bonds deeper than shared success. Villeneuve completes his letter with words of love, seals it carefully, places it in the drawer with his other personal effects. Whatever happens in the hours ahead, Marie-Jeanne will know that his final thoughts were of home, of the life they built together, of quiet moments that sustained him through the loudest storms. He calls for his steward, requests his dress uniform. If he must lead his fleet into battle against impossible odds, he'll do so with proper dignity, not because he believes it will change the outcome, but because some gestures matter beyond their practical effect. The uniform feels heavier than usual as he dresses. Each button, each decoration carries the weight of responsibility, the accumulated trust of everyone who depends on his judgment. The mirror reflects a man who looks older than his 51 years, worn by months of impossible choices and sleepless nights. But there's something else in that reflection, a quiet resolution that comes not from confidence in victory, but from acceptance of duty, the peace that settles over you when you stop fighting the current and instead focus on swimming as strongly as possible in whatever direction honor demands. This is the Admiral's burden, and perhaps yours as well. Not the weight of certainty, but the weight of commitment. The knowledge that leadership sometimes means choosing the best available path rather than waiting for the perfect one to appear. Outside, the morning continues its ancient rhythm. Gulls cry over the harbor. Waves lap against hulls that have carried their crews safely through countless voyages. The sun climbs higher, burning off the last wisps of dawn mist, revealing the day in all its stark clarity. Soon, very soon, Admiral Villeneuve will give the order that sets everything in motion. But for now, in these last moments of quiet preparation, he allows himself one final pause. One last breath of peace before the storm. The kind of stillness you deserve too, after your long days of carrying others toward uncertain but necessary futures. Setting sail, a voyage towards destiny. The stillness breaks with the soft chime of ship's bells, 8 bells marking the morning watch. And with that sound, the great machinery of departure begins to turn. You know this feeling, don't you? That moment when preparation must give way to action. When all the planning, all the careful consideration, all the weight of decision crystallizes into movement. Admiral Villeneuve straightens his shoulders and steps toward his destiny. "Signal the fleet," he says quietly to his flag captain. "Prepare to weigh anchor." The order ripples outward like stones dropped in still water. From ship to ship, the signal flags climb the halyards. bright patches of color against the morning sky. And aboard each vessel, 21,000 souls begin the ancient ritual of setting sail. Watch how they move. These men who have done this countless times before. There is something almost meditative in their actions. The boatswain's whistle pierces the air, sharp and clear, and immediately the deck comes alive with purposeful motion. Bare feet pad across sun-warmed planking. Hands that have tied these knots in darkness, in storm, in the rolling chaos of heavy seas, now work with quiet precision. The great anchor cables strain and creak as the capstan turns, round and round, each revolution bringing tons of iron chain aboard. "Heave away, lads," calls a petty officer, his voice carrying the rhythm that has driven ships to sea for centuries. And they do heave, backs bent, muscles straining against the weight that holds them to shore. Each turn of the capstan is a choice, a commitment to leave safety behind. Below decks, other hands prepare for what may come. The gun crews move through their deadly choreography, running out the great cannons, checking the tackle, ensuring each 32-pounder sits perfectly in its port. These guns, cast in foundries across France and Spain, represent months of a nation's labor. Iron and bronze shaped into instruments of war. But see how gently they handle the powder charges, how carefully they arrange the shot. There is reverence here, not bloodlust. These men understand the terrible responsibility of their tools. Like you understand the weight of the decisions you make, decisions that ripple outward, touching lives you may never see. The sail handlers climb the rigging with practiced ease, up and up into the web of rope and canvas that will catch the wind. From deck level, they look impossibly small against the towering masts. Yet each man knows his place, knows exactly which line to pull, which sail to loose. Let fall the topsails, comes the command, and acres of canvas tumble free. Great sheets of hemp and flax that have been sewn by hand, rope by rope, seam by seam. The sails catch the morning breeze and fill, slowly at first, then with growing confidence as the wind finds its way into every fold. The ships begin to move. It starts as barely perceptible motion, just the slightest shift in how the harbor walls align with the masts. But gradually, inevitably, these floating cities gather way. The water parts before their bows with soft, musical sounds, the gentle chuckling of waves against oak and pine. One by one, the great ships of the combined fleet follow their admiral toward the harbor mouth. The Bucentaure leads, her massive bulk cutting through water that reflects the morning sky like polished metal. Behind her comes the Redoutable, then the San Augustin, the Neptune, each vessel a world unto itself, carrying its crew toward an uncertain horizon. The townspeople of Cadiz line the harbor walls to watch. Old fishermen who have seen countless fleets depart, merchants whose fortunes depend on safe passages, women whose sons and husbands stand on those distant decks. They wave these watchers from the shore. Some call out blessings. Others simply stand in silence, understanding what this departure might mean. Admiral Villeneuve stands on his quarterdeck, watching the familiar landmarks of Cadiz fall astern. The cathedral spire, the fortress walls, the narrow streets where he has walked these past weeks, carrying the burden of Napoleon's impossible orders. All of it growing smaller now, fading into the haze of distance and memory. He thinks perhaps of other departures, other moments when duty called him from safety into uncertainty. Every leader knows these crossings, these moments when you must leave the known world behind and trust in preparation, in judgment, in the competence of those who follow you. The wind strengthens as they clear the harbor. The ships heel slightly, finding their rhythm in the longer swells of the open Atlantic. Sails that hung slack now pull with authority, driving these wooden mountains through water that stretches unbroken to the horizon. Below decks, the cooks light their galley fires for what may be the last hot meal these men will share. The ship's surgeons check their instruments, their saws and probes and bottles of rum that serve as anesthesia. The Marines clean their muskets and fix their bayonets, preparing for the close, brutal work that comes when ships grapple together in battle. Yet there is no panic in these preparations, no desperate haste. These are professionals doing what professionals do. They understand that excellence lies not in dramatic gestures, but in the quiet accumulation of small, precise actions. Like the work you do. building something meaningful through countless decisions, countless small acts of leadership and care. The sun climbs higher, burning off the last of the morning mist. The coast of Spain becomes a thin line on the eastern horizon, then disappears entirely. Now there is only water, endless blue water stretching in all directions, and the knowledge that somewhere out there, Admiral Nelson waits with his fleet of oak and iron and British determination. But that confrontation lies hours ahead, for now there is only this: the steady rhythm of ship's life at sea, the creak of timber and cordage, the whisper of wind through canvas, the soft conversations of men who have cast their lot together and now sail toward whatever fate awaits. Admiral Villeneuve checks his watch, calculates distance and wind speed with the automatic precision of decades at sea. His officers cluster around the chart table, plotting their course with careful attention to currents and shoals. Everything that can be planned has been planned. Everything that can be prepared has been prepared. Now comes the hardest part of leadership, the waiting. The steady progress toward a moment that will test everything they have built together. The kind of test you face, too, when all your preparation, all your careful building, meets the unforgiving reality of the world. The fleet sails on, 21 ships carrying 21,000 souls toward their appointment with history. Behind them, Cadiz fades into memory. Ahead lies the vast uncertainty of the sea, and whatever destiny awaits those brave enough to meet it. In the growing warmth of the Spanish sun, with the rhythm of waves against hulls and wind in canvas, these men find their own kind of peace. The peace that comes from accepting what cannot be changed, and focusing on what can be done well, with honor in the time remaining. The same peace that waits for you, when you finally allow your racing mind to rest. The impending storm, facing the British fleet, the hours pass like a meditation in motion. The combined fleet moves steadily southwest, each ship finding its rhythm in the gentle swells. You can almost feel the collective breathing of 21,000 souls, the steady inhale and exhale of men who have made their peace with uncertainty. This is something you understand, isn't it? That moment when you stop fighting the inevitable and simply proceed. When you've done everything you can to prepare, made every decision within your power, and now must trust in the process you've set in motion. Admiral Villeneuve stands on his quarterdeck, watching the horizon with the same quiet intensity you bring to those moments when everything you've built hangs in the balance. The weight he carries has not diminished, but it has transformed. No longer the crushing burden of indecision, it has become something else entirely. The focused weight of responsibility accepted. The morning sun climbs higher, burning away the last wisps of coastal mist. The sea stretches endlessly ahead, beautiful and indifferent. Some of the younger sailors have never been this far from land. They lean against the rigging, watching Spain disappear behind them, perhaps thinking of mothers who will light candles in windows, wives who will scan empty harbors, children who will listen for footsteps that may never come. But there is no despair in these thoughts, only a kind of tender acknowledgement of what matters most. Love doesn't diminish because of distance or danger. If anything, it grows more precious, more clear. You know this feeling. Those nights when you lie awake, thinking not of spreadsheets or strategic plans, but of the people who believe in what you're building. The faces that flash through your mind when the pressure mounts and the stakes feel impossibly high. The quiet promise you make to yourself that whatever comes, you will be worthy of their trust. By midday, the fleet has found its sailing formation. 33 ships moving in loose order, their white sails catching the strengthening breeze. From a distance, they might look like clouds drifting across the blue. Peaceful, almost dreamlike, but aboard each vessel, men are quietly checking their preparations one final time. The gunners run their hands along familiar bronze barrels. The Marines inspect their muskets with the care of craftsmen examining their tools. The ship's boys distribute fresh water and hardtack, moving through the gun decks with the quiet efficiency of those who understand their role in something larger than themselves. There is beauty in this preparation, the same beauty you find in your own rituals of readiness. Those moments when you organize your thoughts, review your plans, and center yourself before stepping into the arena where your decisions will be tested. Captain Berenger walks among his men, offering a word here, a nod there. He doesn't speak of victory or glory. Instead, he reminds them of simpler things: the importance of staying close to their messmates, of keeping their powder dry, of remembering that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act well despite it. These are the conversations that matter when everything is on the line. Not grand speeches about destiny or empire, but quiet reminders of what it means to be human, to be present, to do your part with dignity and care. The afternoon brings the first whispers of unease. A lookout high in the rigging of one of the Spanish ships calls down to his captain. There, on the northwestern horizon, the faintest suggestion of white specks against the blue. Too distant to count, too far to identify with certainty, but unmistakably there. The British fleet. Word passes from ship to ship in the careful language of naval signals. Flags run up masts and flutter briefly before being hauled down again. The message is simple, but its implications ripple through the fleet like stones dropped in still water. Admiral Villeneuve receives the report with the same calm he has maintained since leaving port. He nods, adjusts his telescope, and peers toward the horizon. For long minutes, he says nothing. The officers around him wait, understanding that this is one of those moments when a leader must absorb the full weight of reality before deciding how to carry it forward. You've stood in similar moments, haven't you? When the call comes that changes everything. When the careful plans you've made meet the unforgiving reality of circumstances beyond your control. When you must choose between the safety of retreat and the uncertain path of commitment. The British ships are still hull down on the horizon, visible only as distant sails to the keenest eyes. But their presence transforms everything. What had been a voyage into possibility becomes something more definite, more final. The abstract concept of battle begins to take concrete shape. Yet there is no panic in this realization. The French and Spanish sailors continue their work with the same steady professionalism they have shown all morning. They adjust sails, check rigging, and maintain the careful choreography of ships underway. If anything, there is a heightened focus now, the sharp clarity that comes when uncertainty gives way to certainty. This too is familiar to you. That moment when the waiting ends and the real work begins. When all the preparation, all the planning, all the sleepless nights of worry distill into the simple reality of what must be done next. Captain Berenger finds himself thinking of his garden in Normandy. The apple trees he planted 3 springs ago should be bearing fruit now. He wonders if his wife remembered to pick the late pears, if she saved some for preserving as she always does. These thoughts don't distract him from his duties. Instead, they anchor him to what he is fighting to protect. The weight you carry is not so different. Behind every difficult decision, every calculated risk, every moment of doubt, there are faces and places and promises that give meaning to the struggle. The knowledge that what you're building matters, not just to you, but to those whose lives will be touched by your success or failure. As the afternoon light begins its slow journey toward evening, the British ships grow more distinct. Still distant, still beyond the range of immediate threat, but undeniably real. Nelson's fleet, the finest naval force in the world, sailing with the confidence of those who have rarely known defeat. The contrast is stark. The British ships move in tight formation, their approach as methodical as clockwork. Every sail is perfectly set, every line precisely maintained. They advance like a mathematical proof made manifest, elegant, inexorable, complete. But there is something to be said for the Franco-Spanish fleet as well. Their formation may be looser, their approach less precise, but they carry something the British cannot claim. They sail not from a position of strength, but from a place of courage. They advance not because victory is certain, but because duty demands it. This is the courage that you know intimately, the willingness to act when the odds are uncertain, when the path is unclear, when success depends not on superior resources, but on the depth of your commitment to what you believe is right. The sun continues its arc across the Spanish sky. The 2 fleets draw slowly, inevitably closer, and in the growing certainty of what tomorrow will bring, there is a strange kind of peace. The peace that comes from knowing that the time for doubt has passed, and the time for action has finally arrived. Aftermath, silence on the waves. The thunder has passed, the smoke has lifted. The October sun, which witnessed such fury only hours before, now casts long shadows across waters littered with the debris of ambition and the cost of duty fulfilled. Where once 33 ships sailed in proud formation, now broken masts pierce the surface like grave markers. The sea, that eternal keeper of secrets, accepts what it has been given: splintered wood, torn canvas, and silence, the profound silence that follows when the guns fall quiet and the shouting stops. You know this feeling, don't you? The aftermath. When the presentation is over, when the difficult conversation has been had, when the decision you've agonized over has finally played out. That strange, hollow quiet where you're not yet sure what you've won or lost, only that something irrevocable has occurred. Admiral Villeneuve's flagship, the Bucentaure, drifts powerless. Her mizzen mast lies across the quarterdeck where the admiral stood just hours ago, wrestling with Napoleon's impossible orders. The weight he carried, the burden of 21,000 souls, it has found its resolution in defeat. Not the resolution he hoped for, but perhaps the one his instincts always knew was coming. There is something to be learned here, in this moment of reckoning, about the difference between the outcome we achieve and the integrity with which we pursue it. Villeneuve followed his orders. He led when leadership meant sailing toward almost certain defeat. The measure of what he built was not in victory, but in the courage to act despite knowing the likely cost. Captain Berenger moves through the wreckage of his ship with the same methodical care he showed at dawn. But now, instead of preparing for battle, he tends to its consequences. His hands, which once adjusted rigging with such precision, now bind wounds and offer water to men who trusted him with their lives. This is leadership in its rawest form. Not the speeches or the strategy sessions, but the quiet work that happens when everything you've planned has crumbled. When the only thing left is your commitment to the people who followed you into the storm. He finds young Martinez, the sailor who was writing to his sister when the morning watch began. The boy's leg is badly wounded, but his eyes are alert. "Captain," he whispers, did we do well?" Berenger kneels beside him. What do you tell someone who gave everything they had? What do you say when the outcome bears no resemblance to what you hoped to achieve together? "You did your duty," Berenger says simply. "You stood when it mattered. That is enough." And perhaps that is enough. In your own battles, when the metrics don't reflect the effort, when the market doesn't reward the innovation, when the team you've built faces setbacks that feel overwhelming. Perhaps the question isn't whether you won, but whether you stood when it mattered. The British ships move among the wreckage now, not as conquerors, but as sailors tending to sailors. This, too, is part of the story we often forget. That even in defeat, there can be dignity. Even in failure, there can be honor. The weight you carry doesn't disappear when things go wrong. It transforms into something else. Into resilience, into wisdom, into the quiet strength that comes from having faced the storm and survived it. Admiral Collingwood, now commanding the British fleet after Nelson's fall, sends boats to assist the wounded. He understands something that transcends victory and defeat, that the sea makes brothers of all who sail upon it, and that today's enemy is tomorrow's fellow survivor of forces larger than any of us. The sun continues its descent toward the Spanish coast. The same sun that rose on hope and determination now sets on a changed world. Trafalgar is over, the combined fleet is broken. But the men who sailed from Cadiz harbor, they endure. Changed, certainly. Humbled, perhaps, but not diminished. You see, what we build is never just the visible outcome. It's not just the company that succeeds or fails, the product that launches or doesn't, the team that achieves its targets or falls short. What we build is who we become in the process of building it. Villeneuve, taken prisoner aboard a British ship, stares back toward the Spanish coast where his career began so many years ago. He carries the weight of defeat, yes, but he also carries something else. The knowledge that when his moment came, when history called his name, he answered. Not perfectly, not successfully, but he answered. Captain Berenger helps load the wounded into the British rescue boats. His ship is lost, his mission failed. But his men, most of his men, will see another dawn. In this moment, that feels like victory enough. There's a lesson here for those of us who lie awake, calculating and recalculating, who carry the weight of other people's livelihoods, who make decisions with incomplete information and hope for the best. Sometimes. Sometimes the best we can do is ensure that when the storm passes, the people who trusted us are still standing. The water laps gently against the hull of Berenger's dying ship. The same rhythm that lulled him to sleep in peaceful harbors now provides the soundtrack to endings. But endings, as you know, are also beginnings. Every leader who has ever faced real consequence, every person who has ever risked something that mattered, carries this knowledge. That defeat is not the opposite of success. It is simply another form of completion, another way that the weight we carry finds its resolution, another chapter in the long story of what it means to build something larger than ourselves. The wounded are transferred, the survivors accounted for. The sea begins its work of reclaiming what remains, as it has for countless centuries before this day, as it will for countless centuries after. And in the growing dusk, as the last boats pull away from the wreckage, there is peace, not the peace of victory, but something deeper. The peace that comes from having given everything you had to give, from having honored the trust placed in you, even when the outcome was not what you hoped. This is the peace that waits for you too, at the end of your long days and sleepless nights. Not the peace of having solved every problem or achieved every goal, but the peace of having carried your weight with dignity, of having built something worthy, regardless of how the market receives it or how the metrics measure it. The peace of knowing that when your moment came, you answered the call. Bad. Sunset, a sea of remembrance. The peace of knowing that when your moment came, you answered the call. And now, as the October sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, that same peace settles over these waters where so much was decided, where so much was given. The light has changed from the harsh clarity of afternoon to something softer, more forgiving. The golden hour that photographers cherish, that painters try to capture, that reminds us why sunsets have moved human hearts since we first looked up at the sky. The damaged ships drift in this gentle light, their broken masts and torn sails no longer symbols of defeat, but of something else entirely. Testament to the courage of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when history called their names. French sailors tend to British wounded without thought of nationality. Spanish officers share their water with men who were enemies hours ago. And in these small acts of grace, we see what truly endures when the cannons fall silent. Admiral Villeneuve stands at the stern of his flagship, watching the sun paint the water in shades of amber and gold. And perhaps he understands now what Nelson knew, what every leader who has ever carried the weight of impossible decisions comes to know. That victory and defeat are just words we use to measure outcomes. But they cannot measure the depth of character revealed under pressure, the bonds forged in crisis, the quiet dignity of those who serve something larger than themselves. The water stretches endlessly in all directions. This same Atlantic that has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the dreams and struggles of countless generations. And in its vastness, these events of a single day take their proper place in the long story of human courage and sacrifice. The waves that lap against these hulls will carry the memory of this day to distant shores, to the families waiting in Portsmouth and Cadiz, to the children who will grow up hearing stories of fathers and brothers who sailed into history on an October morning. Captain Berenger moves among his men, offering what comfort he can, a hand on a shoulder, a quiet word, the simple presence of someone who shares their burden. And in these moments, we see leadership stripped to its essence, freed from the complexity of strategy and politics, revealed as what it has always been. One human being choosing to stand with others when standing is difficult, choosing to care when caring hurts. The sun sinks lower now, casting long shadows across the water, and somewhere in those shadows, the spirits of all who have ever carried responsibility, who have ever felt the weight of others' trust, who have ever made difficult decisions in uncertain times, seem to gather in understanding. A fellowship of those who answered when called, who built when building was hard, who led when the way forward was unclear. The light fades gradually, peacefully, as all things must fade. But what was built here, what was proven here, what was honored here in the crucible of crisis, these things do not fade. They become part of the eternal story of human courage, woven into the fabric of memory, carried forward by those who understand that some things are worth the weight they exact upon our hearts. And as the first stars appear in the darkening sky, you too can rest in this knowledge. can let your own burdens settle into the gentle rhythm of waves against shore, can trust that what you are building, the weight you carry, the calls you answer, all find their place in this same eternal story of those who choose to serve something greater than themselves, who choose to build rather than merely consume, who choose to lead even when the way is uncertain. And in this choosing, in this commitment, in this quiet dignity of purpose, find the peace that comes not from having all the answers, but from having asked the right questions, not from achieving perfection, but from pursuing excellence, not from avoiding all mistakes, but from learning from them with grace.